The riddle surrounding Pastor Joel Osteen has finally been solved, and the outcome is not good. Millions of Americans tune in each Sunday to hear Pastor Joel Osteen's message of prosperity and optimism. His flawless smile could be seen on TVs all around the country. For many Americans, Osteen has become the amiable face of contemporary Christianity thanks to his best-selling books, sold-out arena engagements, and a church that was formerly the Houston Rockets basketball arena. A preacher who asserts that having faith would bring prosperity in all facets of life. However, Osteen's ministry has been plagued for years by a web of contradictions and unsettling questions that are hidden beneath that picture-perfect grin. The discrepancy between Osteen's public image and the reality of his business has become unavoidable. From his $10.5 million estate in Houston's most upscale area, to the enigmatic finding of cash and checks concealed in the church walls. According to a former employee of Lakewood Church who worked closely with the Osteen family for more than 5 years, what you see on television is a meticulously produced product. The Joel, who preaches on Sunday mornings about sacrifice and humility, has a life of comfort and fortune that, if witnessed firsthand, would astound the majority of his followers. Even though Osteen preaches about God's abundance and blessings, religious scholars, former insiders, and even devout Christians have expressed grave concerns about the extent of his personal wealth and the ways in which his ministry operates. They wonder if Osteen's interpretation of the gospel is consistent with what Jesus taught. The carpenter from Nazareth who had nowhere to sleep and the preachers who lived in mansions have long been at odds. According to Dr. Michael Wilson, a theological studies professor who has spent decades researching the mega-church movement in America. However, the Osteen example illustrates something more concerning: a deliberate attempt to reframe Christianity as a means of achieving financial success while eschewing the difficult moral requirements at the core of the religion. The revelations from former Lakewood Church staff members, who portray an organization that operates more like a business than a ministry, and where choices about sermons, outreach, and even charitable endeavors are made based more on revenue potential, brand management, and market research than on spiritual discernment, may be the most startling of all. The actual character of Osteen's ministry was exposed to the world in 2017 when Hurricane Harvey destroyed Houston, leaving thousands homeless and in dire need of refuge. And despite his constant efforts to uphold his meticulously constructed identity, what emerged during that crisis still haunts his public image. We're finally unraveling the enigma of one of the most prominent and contentious religious leaders in America today. By revealing the shocking inconsistencies between the message and the messenger, Joel Osteen's empire raises important issues regarding faith, riches, and authenticity in contemporary American religion. God is in charge, that you cannot experience anything without his consent. This choice was made by them, the mansion of faith, the extravagant way of life that is inconsistent with the message. Joel Osteen's kind smile, modest manner, and expressions of thankfulness and God's grace are the cornerstones of his well-cultivated public persona. He regularly discusses the value of achieving contentment, remaining humble before God, and being grateful for life's small blessings with his congregation and television viewers. This simple exterior conceals the immense wealth and luxury that define Osteen's real existence, which contrasts sharply with both his modest public demeanor and the traditional Christian virtues of sacrifice and humility. According to a former security contractor who worked at the Osteen residence for multiple events, there is a startling difference between the Joel Osteen you see on television and the way he truly lives. He lives in a mansion that would make most celebrities jealous, despite his sermons about being thankful for the little things in life. The 17,000-square-foot mansion in Houston's most prestigious suburb, River Oaks, is estimated to be worth $10.5 million. Behind towering iron gates that provide seclusion and protection, the property has 6 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, 3 elevators, a pool house, and a guest house. Previous guests mentioned the home's beautiful woodwork, marble floors, and crystal chandeliers. According to renowned theological historian Dr. Robert Jenkins, who has written extensively on the prosperity gospel movement, he preaches humility from a home larger than most hotels. There's a fundamental mismatch between living in a level of luxury that most of your followers can't even imagine and advising them to be happy with what they have. The Osteen residence is only one facet of a lifestyle that would seem to be at conflict with Jesus' teachings against riches and material belongings, including private jet flights, fancy cars, and designer apparel. According to former employees, Osteen has been spotted sporting watches costing more than $15, and his wardrobe is mostly made up of custom-tailored suits that cost thousands of dollars each. This extravagant lifestyle is especially notable for the way it is funded. When people ask about Osteen's riches, his supporters frequently point to the fact that he has publicly declared since 2004 that he does not receive a salary from Lakewood Church. Rather, his several best-selling novels, which have reportedly brought in tens of millions of dollars, are the main source of his income. One of the best public relations strategies in Christian history, according to a former publishing executive who collaborated with a number of prosperity gospel writers, is the "I don't take a church salary" line. It gives the appearance of sacrifice while hiding the fact that the book's primary selling point is the church platform. It's comparable to a famous person claiming they don't get paid for being featured on a magazine cover. They don't have to because their actual revenue is derived from the publicity. Being a tax-exempt religious organization, Lakewood Church is immune from paying property taxes on its enormous facility, the former Compaq Center, which was once the home of the Houston Rockets, and is not obligated to make its financial information available to the public. According to experts in religious finance, the church receives between $70 and $90 million in tax-free gifts each year. It does not, however, provide its members with comprehensive financial statements. In contrast to many traditional churches, Osteen's personal wealth is likewise opaque in terms of finances. Because of the intricate structure of his economic ventures and the secrecy granted to religious groups under U.S. tax law, it is challenging to ascertain his exact net worth, which is estimated to be between $50 million and $100 million. According to renowned theologian Dr. Sarah Mitchell, there was radical financial transparency in the early Christian church. According to the Book of Acts, Christians shared their resources freely and made sure that no one went without while others enjoyed luxury. The contrary strategy is exemplified by Osteen's business, which purposefully conceals financial information to keep people from seeing the big picture. Former employees of Lakewood describe an organizational culture that emphasizes and conceals money at the same time, encouraging members to donate liberally as a sign of their faith. There was always this disconnect between the constant appeals for donations and the obvious wealth of the leadership. A former Lakewood administrative staffer who asked to remain anonymous said, adding that the specifics of how those donations are spent are still mostly hidden from view. Many employees quietly questioned why a company with such vast resources needed to keep requesting more, even though we were instructed to stress that donating was about sowing seeds for God's blessing. When compared to the financial situation of many Lakewood participants, the lifestyle gap becomes even more pronounced. Demographic data indicates that a sizable percentage of Osteen's followers are from lower to middle-class origins, and many of them make selfless contributions to the ministry in spite of their personal financial difficulties. Jenkins noted that there are people who are living paycheck to paycheck and contributing money they can hardly afford because they think it will result in a financial gift from God. The guy who is urging them to give lives in a mansion and flies away in the meantime. There is an ethical dilemma there that extends beyond theology to fundamental justice and openness. Osteen's supporters contend that he deserves the benefits of his accomplishment and that his books are the main source of his fortune. They note that he transformed Lakewood into America's biggest church and spreads his message of hope to millions of people. According to this viewpoint, his success merely proves the ideas he espouses, which include that God rewards those who are dependable and upbeat. Opponents argue that this justification ignores the more profound inconsistencies between Osteen's way of life with the clear teachings of Jesus regarding wealth, who exhorted his disciples to selfless giving and cautioned against the spiritual perils of wealth. Additionally, they wonder if Osteen's riches truly counts, given that the stark divide between leader and followers leads to a society in which those with the least contribute to the lifestyle of those with the most. Mitchell claimed that this arrangement would have scandalized the early church. Jesus did not suggest that wealthy people with private aircraft and mansions are blessed. On the contrary, Jesus argued that wealthy people find it extremely difficult to enter God's kingdom. Joel Osteen's sermons will never convey that message. You should get rid of that illness, but recovery is on the way. You should remain in debt as a result of that unfortunate break. Shut the doors. Everything was revealed by the Hurricane Harvey affair. Hurricane Harvey hit the Texas coast in late August 2017, bringing with it record-breaking rains and devastating flooding in Houston. The enormous Lakewood Church facility, a 16,800-seat former sports arena that appeared to be the perfect spot to house flood victims, came into focus as the city was submerged and thousands of inhabitants were forced from their homes and in dire need of shelter. Aspects of Joel Osteen's ministry that had been effectively hidden by years of meticulously planned public relations were revealed in what turned out to be one of the most illuminating episodes of his public career. Social media users started to wonder why Lakewood Church, one of the biggest structures in Houston, was still blocked to those seeking shelter. As the city's waters rose and emergency shelters soon filled up, the church's outside seemed to be accessible and entirely intact in photos that went viral, defying Lakewood's official assertion that the building was inaccessible because of heavy flooding. H was drowning. His doors were locked, recalled Maria Gonzalez, a Houston resident who sought refuge at different locales during the crisis after losing her home due to flooding. We simply wanted them to open a building that is closed for the majority of the week so that people could be dry and safe. We weren't requesting money or special treatment. As news agencies began covering the issue, the public's outcry quickly rose, drawing a comparison between Lakewood's shuttered doors and the many smaller churches and mosques in Houston that had quickly opened as emergency shelters, despite having far fewer resources than Osteen's mega ministry. Robert Downen, a former reporter for the Houston Chronicle who covered the incident, detailed the quickly developing PR catastrophe. The contradiction between Osteen's incessant preaching of Christian love and giving and his seeming unwillingness to disrupt his organization in order to aid those in need was what made the situation especially harmful. For many Houstonians, it was the pinnacle of hypocrisy. Lakewood Church released a number of changing statements as the criticism grew. They began by saying that the structure was inaccessible. Photos that refuted this story claimed that the facility was unsafe because the basement levels were flooded, but this didn't explain why the top floors couldn't be used. After days of harsh public criticism, they finally declared that the church would operate as a distribution hub for goods, and subsequently as a shelter. According to crisis management specialist Rebecca Simon, Osteen's reputation suffered greatly as a result of the shifting justifications. The audience would have been understanding if the church had just opened right away, notwithstanding any valid practical issues. Rather, their hesitancy and subsequent shifting explanations gave the impression that they were reacting to negative publicity rather than sincere concern. Many people were especially concerned by Osteen's first reaction to the disaster. His social media sites kept sharing general inspiring posts while Houston was underwater, but they never acknowledged the tragedy or provided any particular assistance. After days of public criticism, he eventually addressed the matter head-on, but it seemed more reactionary than productive. Later, former Lakewood employees disclosed that deeper institutional interests that were typically kept out of the public eye were mirrored in the delayed response. According to a former Lakewood facilities manager, there was instant worry about possible harm to the structure and machinery. Infrastructure, carpeting, and audiovisual equipment had cost millions of dollars. The main focus of the conversations I overheard was safeguarding those resources, not the number of individuals we could assist. It was an eye-opening experience that revealed the real priorities. A leadership culture that prioritized image control over emergency response was described by other former employees. Organizing assistance was not the focus of the initial discussions. According to a former communications team member who asked to remain anonymous, they dealt with messaging and how to manage the PR crisis. The immediate needs of flood victims were not as important as the perception of Lakewood. The Harvey event was especially noteworthy because it ran counter to the meticulously crafted narrative Osteen had developed over many years. His message always focused on plenty, optimism, and God's blessings. When a real crisis arose, this religion appeared unprepared to deal with true human pain and sacrifice. Dr. Michael Wilson, a Christian scholar, noted that prosperity theology appears attractive when things are going well. However, it is devoid of the spiritual means to deal with pain, sacrifice, and true tragedy. Because that kind of sacrifice isn't part of the prosperity gospel story, Austenian theology lacked a framework for prioritizing institutional comfort over human need when Harvey struck. It was noticeable how different it was from other religious organizations amid the same crises. While Lakewood Metris Mech had significantly more resources, several smaller synagogues, churches, and mosques in Houston opened as shelters right away. Austeen's tardy response was compared negatively to a local furniture company owner who made national headlines for opening his showrooms to flood victims right away. Wilson pointed out that the Harvey episode exposed a fundamental contradiction at the core of Austeen's ministry rather than merely a PR gaffe. His message is about living your life to the fullest and enjoying God's many bounties. However, the fundamental tenets of Christianity, sacrifice, service, and putting others before oneself, seem to be lacking during those pivotal early days of the deluge. Even though Lakewood finally reopened and helped with relief operations, Austeen's reputation suffered significant and long-lasting harm. The event left a lasting impression that Lakewood prioritized self-protection over self-sacrifice when forced to choose between providing for immediate human needs and institutional comfort. Houston was drowning. He had shut his doors, evolved into something greater than a critique of a particular ruling. When put to the test by a real-world catastrophe, it became a metaphor for the seeming discrepancy between Austeen's inspirational speeches and the organization's true priorities. I don't blame them if they don't, but this is simply how I choose to live my life and what I teach based on the Bible. Therefore, the first, don't believe that Jesus avoids discussing sin, hell, or harsh realities while preaching wealth and avoiding hardship. What Joel Osteen doesn't say is one of the most unique features of his ministry and may be the secret to his enormous appeal. Although human depravity, the reality of divine punishment, and the necessity for moral transformation are frequently heavily emphasized in conventional Christian preaching, Osteen has established his brand on a purposefully selected style of Christianity that places a premium on optimism while avoiding these more difficult facets of the religion. Theologian Dr. Richard Martinez, who has studied Austeen's teachings over a 15-year span, noted that he smiles through every sermon and avoids anything awkward. His lectures include a wide range of subjects that are simply absent from the Bible as compared to its actual content, especially those that deal with human brokenness, divine judgment, and the cost of discipleship. Anyone conversant with Orthodox theology can see this selective approach to Christian doctrine right away. Osteen hardly ever speaks of sin, steers clear of the idea of hell, and seldom ever brings up Jesus' many teachings on the perils of money or the need for selfless service. His teachings, on the other hand, almost entirely center on themes of material blessing, positive thinking, and personal empowerment. According to comparative religion professor Dr. Sarah Mitchell, it's Christianity with all the awkward parts taken out. Jesus discussed money more than nearly any other subject, but the main focus of his teachings was on the spiritual perils of it, as well as the need for altruistic giving. This is entirely reversed by Ein, who portrays money as a sign of God's favor rather than a spiritual danger. This selective theology, according to former Lakewood Church insiders, is not just a personal emphasis or interpretation, but rather a purposeful marketing tactic. There were direct discussions regarding what subjects would or would not be relevant to the target audience. Disclosed that Austeen's messages were created by a former content developer. Everything that could cause discomfort or interfere with people's way of life was methodically eliminated. Theological faithfulness was not the aim. It was the expansion and retention of the audience. This strategy is part of Lakewood's larger ministry concept and goes beyond Austeen's sermons. Osteen has continuously avoided taking firm stances on matters ranging from abortion to same-sex marriage to racial justice. In contrast to many churches that uphold certain theological positions on contentious social or moral issues, requested to explain his opinions in interviews with the media. According to a former Lakewood executive pastor, the purposeful vagueness is strategic. You risk alienating a portion of your audience once you adopt a firm stance on any contentious issue. You keep your attractiveness as wide as possible by staying ambiguous and concentrating only on positive aspects of yourself. It's a commercial choice disguised as religious modesty. Osteen also steers clear of controversy when it comes to political matters. Osteen has meticulously maintained a studied neutrality that detractors claim is a surrender of moral leadership, in contrast to many well-known pastors on the religious right and left who address legislative issues they believe to be ethically essential. He avoids politics, but that isn't the issue. According to renowned ethicist Dr. James Peterson, many religious leaders who are thoughtful do it. His avoidance of moral clarity on matters where the Christian tradition has historically felt obligated to comment is the problem. It becomes morally acceptable to claim to be a Christian while remaining silent on matters of justice, oppression, and human dignity. Its radical departure from the historical Christian tradition while maintaining its authority and character is what makes this chosen approach so remarkable. Across denominations, traditional Christian preaching has often balanced what theologians refer to as law and gospel, the difficult requirements of God's moral standards, as well as the kind offering of pardon and peacemaking. According to Martinez, Osteen provides the solace without the difficulty, the blessing without the requirement. It would be equivalent to recommending Christianity's dessert course without the main course, aesthetically pleasing but ultimately devoid of the nourishing content that the faith was intended to offer. The psychological attractiveness of this method was explained by former Lakewood attendees, especially for people who are dealing with life's obstacles or who are harboring guilt about previous transgressions. It felt like such a relief when I first started attending, said Rebecca Johnson, a former member. It wasn't until years later that I realized something crucial was lacking, a genuine call to moral change or service beyond self-improvement. My prior church experience had been heavy on shame and condemnation. Joel made me feel good about myself and my future. Both conservative evangelical leaders and progressive mainline scholars have questioned whether Osteen's teaching is genuine Christianity or just motivational speaking disguised in religious language, and theologians from all denominations have sharply criticized this emphasis on positive thinking and personal blessing rather than moral transformation or social responsibility. According to evangelical theologian Dr. Mark Simmons, when Jesus said, "Take up your cross and follow me," he wasn't referring to a method to live your greatest life right now. The cross represents suffering and sacrifice, precisely the elements Osteen systematically removes from his presentation of the faith. As a result, people may experience short-term relief, but the deeper human desire for transcendent meaning and moral purpose is not addressed. Osteen's perspective on human suffering and injustice is perhaps the most instructive. While traditional Christian theology has focused a great deal of attention on understanding pain and creating tools for fighting evil, Osteen's teachings generally treat suffering as either a brief setback on the way to blessing or the outcome of negative thought patterns that can be overcome by adopting new attitudes. Mitchell noted that Osteen's teachings hardly offer any theological framework for dealing with real tragedy or structural injustice. The prosperity gospel offers little more than to be optimistic and hope for a miracle when confronted with cancer, poverty, or oppression, a message that can turn nasty if the miracle doesn't happen. By methodically eliminating the difficult demands while keeping the reassuring promises, Osteen has produced a message that has great appeal in a society that is already focused on convenience and comfort. This theological selectivity produces a religious product that is precisely suited for the contemporary consumer mentality. Christianity is a program for self-improvement rather than a call to moral transformation and service to others. Martinez said, "He's mastered the art of making people feel spiritual without actually challenging them to change. This is a very marketable skill in modern America and a fundamental betrayal of the tradition he claims to represent." To put it another way, you are 20% more likely to live a stressed, tense, crisis-prone life for every peace dealer you allow in your life. Behind the scenes at Lakewood Church, away from the television cameras and the devoted audiences, there is an organizational culture that former employees characterize as more corporate than ministerial. It is a sophisticated media operation that prioritizes audience metrics, brand management, and revenue generation over spiritual development or genuine community. According to former employees, corporate faith is a media empire rather than a ministry. According to a former senior staff member who worked in Lakewood's media department for 5 years, "You weren't working for a pastor. You were working for a brand." Everything, and the first mean everything, was examined from the perspective of how it would impact the Joel Osteen brand, rather than through more conventional ministry considerations like spiritual impact or theological faithfulness. A former marketing consultant who worked with Lakewood for 3 years said, "We conducted focus groups and audience testing that would impress a Madison Avenue advertising firm." This corporate approach is evident in many areas of Lakewood's operations, from the highly produced worship services to the meticulously crafted public messaging to the advanced market research that informs almost every decision. This market-driven approach extends to the content of Osteen's messages themselves, which are developed through a process more akin to product development than traditional sermon preparation. Joel's clothing choices, book titles, stage design, and even sermon topics were all tested with sample audiences to maximize appeal and minimize anything that might cause negative reactions. According to former staff members, Joel would review and customize the content, but the core product was created like any other media offering, with the goal of maximizing audience retention and driving specific consumer actions like book purchases or donations. According to a former content developer, a team of people would identify themes that resonated with audience metrics, gather inspirational anecdotes, craft memorable phrases, and structure messages to create emotional high points at specific intervals. This explanation contrasts sharply with the majority of Christian traditions' approaches to sermon preparation, where theological,